Those in pastoral ministry, or really any church ministry position, be it paid or volunteered, we will all be thrown into situations that we are not prepared for, that we are not ready to handle. When I took a volunteer position as a fire chaplain, I was not ready to walk into my first car accident scene where I had two girls crying over fear that they had just survived a head on collision. And then there was a man sitting in tears on the sidewalk because he caused the collision. I wasn't ready for that, but I was the chaplain and I was the one person that God wanted to be there to use in that situation. There are so many different types of traumatic situations that Christian ministers could be thrown into where even if you had the proper training and instruction at one point in time, how would you remember how to handle this particular situation that is coming upon you years after your training? For this reason, I recommend for everyone in Christian ministry to own a copy of Counseling Through the Storm, a guide to treating crisis and trauma by Brooke Osborne and Karen Radowski. In this substantial and yet accessible volume, Brooke and Karen provide those in Christian leadership roles with the tools and recommendations needed to walk into numerous crisis situations with both grace and wisdom. Although I do got to say, reading this book kind of felt a little bit like I was drinking from a fire hose. There was so much good information coming at me so fast. I definitely didn't take it all in. But now I have Counseling Through the Storm on my bookshelf. So when I encounter suicide, domestic violence, childhood stressors, natural disasters, and more, I will have an easy to read resource to set my thoughts back on a solid foundation of wisdom to help those in need. And if you have a few minutes, I would like to tell you a little bit more about Counseling Through the Storm. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you as you help others, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my current book reviews. Also, like and share this video to help others know about the work of Brooke Osborne and Karen Radowski. The most affordable way for you to build a theological library today is through Logos Bible software. Follow the link in the description below to purchase your Logos edition of Counseling Through the Storm. Or follow my other link in the description to subscribe to Logos Bible software for 60 days for free to enjoy their massive library and helpful Bible study tools. B&H Academics 2025 release by PhD professors Brooke Osborne and Karen Radowski, who both received their degrees at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and I say that because that definitely impacts their illustration as well as the color and the life of this book. They provide those in ministry with biblical and practical wisdom to counsel others through times of suffering and crisis. Now, the book begins with an introduction on the theology of suffering to help the reader start with the foundation that God works through suffering. Crisis isn't something for the Christian worker to run away from, but it is something for us to boldly walk into, knowing that God does great work during these times of darkness. Then in part 2, they look at what they define as a crisis, how we intervene in these times. And interestingly enough, they look at ways that social media has changed the ways we walk into and handle crises. We have been so submerged into social media that we have lost sight of all the ways it has changed our lives over the last 20 years. Part 3 looks at grief in general. I think everyone who reads this book should make it a priority to read through parts 1 through 3 in order to have a solid foundation on suffering, crisis, and grief. And that's only 92 pages. Nothing overwhelming, at least. At least I don't think it should be for anyone in ministry. And then you should jump ahead to page 361 and read pages 361 to 387 on caring for the helpers. Anyone who is involved in providing counsel for others in times of grief and trauma should read those chapters on compassion fatigue and when the crisis hits home. I had no idea that compassion fatigue was what I had been struggling with at times in ministry until I read this chapter. A callousness was beginning to develop in my heart on account of some interactions that I had in ministry. And it turns out that that ends up being really textbook compassion fatigue. And it was so refreshing to read a book that understands what it is like to give to others and then get lied at and screamed at in response of the mercy that you're trying to give. It was a breath of fresh air. And if you're someone who gives to the needy, there will be times that they will attack you in response to your grace. Then I think it's more up to the reader how to approach the rest of the book, the main body of the book. You can choose to just read through all of the rest of the sections that cover various types of crises, such as suicide, trauma, children, family, and the church. I think it really is helpful for everyone in ministry to read them. But even if you don't have time to read through all of those sections, at least look for those that are going to be most applicable to your ministry role. And then keep this book on hand. And if suddenly you find yourself in a situation where a parent comes to you and asks for counsel because their child is being bullied at school, or a natural disaster strikes your community, or one of your missionary confides with you that their marriage is falling apart on the field, grab the chapter in this book that deals with that issue and read the 10 to 30 pages that cover this particular storm that has begun to strike your church and your family. Get refreshed on the type of resources you can look for, the type of signs you should be on guard against, and the wisdom that you can give. Now, I have other books on my bookshelf that relate to family counseling, suicide, and a lot of the other issues that are covered in Counseling Through the Storm. But the thing is, when the storm arrives, I don't have time to press pause on my life to go back and read through an entire book on that subject. But a 20-page chapter, I can do that. And I think that that's what makes this book such a valuable resource. And then on top of that, there are so many lay pastors, volunteers who have no graduate training, no counseling degrees or training, and yet they're put in situations that are way beyond their depth, and they're providing counseling and hope for those in crisis. And this book would be an ideal resource for them to be able to read to at least get a minimal hold on how to handle these types of situations. It would just be a great resource. So I was very thankful to have read through Counseling Through the Storm, a guide to treating crisis and trauma by Brooke Osborne and Karen Radowski. And I hope that many other men and women in ministry grab this book, read the crucial sections at the beginning and at the end, and have it ready for those hours when the storm strikes at your church and your community.